Radio Bypass, bringing you rock and roll music that deserves to be heard. Discover new bands. Here's some old favorites on Radio Bypass.
Hey, rockers. We're coming to you on Christmas Eve here today with a special guest, somebody else for you to get to know, another great musician making some incredible music, but along the Christmas lines of things at the moment. Please welcome to Radio Bypass, Peter Orullian from Symphony North. How are you, Peter?
I'm well, Ralph. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk to you about your debut album that you've created, and as I learn more about it and listen to it more, I realize it's obviously a very deeply personal piece for you. But I'm kind of interested in a lot of things about it. Number one is how you got to this point, because what I know about your background, I know you're a published author. So you've written books, but I guess you've always been a musician too, and you're a singer, and obviously a storyteller with this debut album from Symphony North. So love to get to know you a little bit. Tell us your story.
Yeah, there's for me kind of a blessing and a curse from my earliest memories. I knew that I wanted to make music. I knew that I wanted to tell stories. I was an impromptu storyteller and sort of songwriter, even as a kid. And then I have, like, deep in my bones, I've always loved Christmas. The tinsel and the holly and all of that, but also the reverential side and everything in between. And it's very authentic for me. I just adore everything about the season. And so I thought, I woke up one day when I was 17, I was a senior in high school, with the idea that if I could combine all these things, I'd be a happy person. And the curse of that is that, they're hard things to succeed at. I joke about this. I know it's not easy, but it would have almost been easier for me to be an attorney or a doctor than to succeed as a writer and a musician.
Right.
They're very difficult fields. Because there's a lot of subjectivity, and who decides what's good and what's successful and what gets published and what gets played. But that was the vision. But then I went to school, and I moved to Seattle. I got a job at Microsoft, and everything just kind of pulled me in a lot of directions. And along the way, I published some books through publishers in New York, and I got to front a couple of bands in sort of reunion tours in Europe. I did some vocal training here in Seattle with a pretty legendary voice trainer. And of course, all the time celebrating Christmas most of the year, because I'm one of those crazy Christmas guys.
Your trees stay up all year long?
I do. I've got a tree on my desk just out of sight that stays up all year.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I'm one of those guys, and I've got Christmas music I listen to all year. The bah humbug people who say, "Oh, I can't listen to Christmas music before Thanksgiving or whatever." One year we were this was being bantered around in the halls at Xbox, where I worked for a while. And I said, yeah, all of that music about goodwill and peace, who needs that? And they said, okay, fair enough. Go ahead and listen to your Christmas music. But then, what happened was I had two pretty consequential meetings. Because I was doing music marketing for Xbox and the entertainment group at Microsoft. I got a lot of backstage passes. I'm sure you got your share of those in the radio business, and you got to rub shoulders with heroes.
I did.
And the first hero I met was a guy by the name of Chip Davis. He's the founder and composer for a band called Fresh Air. And they started more as a new age group, but they wrote a Christmas record in the 80s that I think was like an inflection point for Christmas music. It was like modern Christmas music. It had drums and bass. They had harpsichord and some classical instruments too, but it was different than just every year artists put out like a Christmas album. They're renderings of the classics, and they're cool, especially if you love the artist. Like Halford's put out a couple of Christmas albums, and I love them because I love Halford, but they're not like new songs. It's like "Oh Holy Night" sung Halford's way,
right?
And, but Mannheim did some original music, and their reinterpretations of the classics were really unique. And about a decade later, Trans-Siberian Orchestra came along did the same thing, but with a heavier edge and with a splash of storytelling. Um, but as I was kind of going through my life, I made the observation that most of the concept records that I listen to, that though I adore them, usually the music is kind of composed, and then the even if they know they want to do a concept album, they kind of layer the story on top.
Mhm.
And what I wanted to do is I wanted to make the storytelling more integral to the album. I wanted, like, so when I began, let me finish the story. So then I had a second inflection point, or big moment for me, in when I got to meet Paul O'Neill, the founder of TSO. And I pulled it. I got the backstage pass, and I was backstage, and I got to meet Paul, and he never toured at that point. He was just back in Florida writing the music and creating symphonies and whatever else. And I got a chance to just tell him how much his music meant to me, and a little bit of, I had this vision for what I wanted to do. And he pulled me into his private green room for almost 45 minutes and talked to me about it. And I said, look, Paul, I'm not even sure I need to do it anymore. There's so many bands that have done like Christmas rock and roll stuff. And he looked me in the eye and said, Peter, if you don't chase that, I'll be disappointed in you. And just like, I don't know, just was this amazing moment. Like, here's this guy who's owns the world of Christmas music telling me to go get it. And so,
Giving you a stamp of approval.
yeah, I had shared, excuse me, I had shared with him a little bit of my vision and what I wanted to do. And he said, look, the world always needs great Christmas music and always needs great Christmas stories. And I think he could sense that I was very earnest about it, right? It wasn't a cash grab. It wasn't because, hey, Christmas music, you can kind of sell that. And it came from a very real place for me, because I care so much about the season and all of its. I love Christmas Story, and I love Christmas Vacation, and I also love Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life. So I started, man. I started with the story. I had published several novels by that point. So, and I've been studying and teaching the craft of writing and storytelling all of my adult life. So I started with the story, and then what I did is I backfilled the music. So I said, look, there's places where traditional or canonical Christmas carols could have a place, because the meaning or the feeling of them, or the sounds or the tones, advance the story, or they help the story. But then there was all the gaps where there wasn't music for that, and those were my opportunities for original songwriting. So I know that's kind of a long answer, but that's how I kind of built Symphony North and the Bell Ringer. Began with the story. I wrote the music to sort of help tell the story. And then, finally got it out. I just finished the novel. I waited till I was done with the record and all of that to write the novel, and just sent that to my agent, because my vision is that I feel like we get 90% of all of our Christmas stories are either Hallmark and romance, or they're send-ups. They're comedies, and I love all that stuff. I mean, my movie library has got 100 movies in it of Christmas stuff, but we don't get very many of the poignant stories anymore. And
Right.
So the last thing I'll say before I stop blabbering is, which is where you started with your question, is my dad's a World War II veteran, and I made the observation that as all of my young life, I would watch these guys out in the cold, ringing bells for change, and from all kinds of organizations.
Right. I
And
always think of Salvation Army when I think of the bell ringers.
yeah, they certainly have popularized it. Although, the nerd in me went and researched that, and it actually goes back. The guy in the Salvation Army who started it in America, and he was in San Francisco. He was trying to feed a whole bunch of homeless people that were hungry and cold, and he didn't have the money. So, and he remembered when he lived in Liverpool as a kid in England, that a shop owner there, after a mining accident where all of the men and even the young boys who worked in the mines were killed, and leaving widows and orphaned young girls with destitute, he put out a bowl on the wharf there for sailors and travelers to throw their change in. And he remembered that, and that's how he started to collect money. So the idea of collection pots predates all of America. But anyway, these people that stand in the cold to fetch our pennies when we're walking into the Target or, Walmart or whatever, I always, it's like, man, there's some real grit. And who is that person willing to stand in the cold all day, for change?
Right.
And in my mind, I just went, it's the kind of person that's like really knows sacrifice, who knows how to stand a post. And for me, that was the men and women of my dad's generation. And so I came up with the idea of telling the story of one of these bell ringers who was a veteran coming home, trying to come home. He was an orphan. He got orphaned. He spent time in a boys' home, wound up on the street, went to war, came home, got married. His wife passes of cancer. He decides to give his child up because he can't take care of him, he thinks, appropriately. So the record opens with the bell ringer, which you told me you played the other day.
Right.
He's coming back to the Bronx where he lived, trying to come home finally after this torturous life. And the only job he can get is ringing a bell. And what happens is he learns across the record and across the story that it's precisely all of these wounds of his past, all of this trauma, if you will, that makes him exactly the right person to help these people in the street that he's meeting, because he understands their pain and the things they're going through. And so the story, and then he learns a sense of self-worth, and that he has something to give. So, I mean, that's the story in a nutshell, but that's my genesis from a kid to writing the record and why I wrote the record I wrote. So I apologize for the long answer, but once I get started, I get very, very passionate about it.
I get it. I get that way about music also. Man, so really this has been a lifetime in the making, kind of. But when you sat down with a clear direction for yourself that this is how you wanted to approach it. So you said you wrote the story first and then created the music around it. And it's a double album. In the old days, this would be a double album. So that's a lot of music and a lot of words. This had I mean, how long once you had the direction, like, okay, this is my concept, this is what it's going to be about, between the writing of the words, the story, laying out the story, creating the music to go with it. I mean, this had to be a long process as well. Not your life, but
it was. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but once you decided this is it, this is going to be the story, and I write this, and that takes X amount of time. Now, sometimes I assume if you're writing words first to create music around it, you also may sometimes have to go back and alter the words a little bit too that you've now written in your story. So, I mean, I just feel like this had to take you forever. How long did it take you to get this whole thing to fruition?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and I don't think I've ever talked about this. So when I say I wrote the story, what I did was I kind of wrote the spine. I didn't actually write lyrics. I knew the story beats, and I knew the story architecture. Because I've studied and taught this, it has to do with an inciting incident and the backstory, and then moments of trying and failing, that dark night of the soul. And then a changed person that can go and sort of win the day or come to some sort of epiphany. And there's a lot more to it, but I laid all of that out. And so I knew this sort of story motion. And once I had that, then I started composing against those sort of story moments.
Okay.
And so that I wrote the music based upon the feeling and what I could see in my head of the scene. Once I had the music done, and I knew what was happening in that scene or in that song, then I wrote the lyrics on top of it. But I remember I started in July. Which year was that? I started in July. Well, when I got serious, I think it was 2017. In July, I remember I started that sort of story outline process. And I didn't even own Pro Tools at that point. I bought Pro Tools a few weeks later, and I didn't know how to use it. I just knew that it was a good one to have because
Right.
audio engineers had it. Anyway, so in September, I thought, well, this is how naive was. I'm going to have the record out for Christmas, and
Right.
it was ridiculous thinking, but I was not going to be deterred. And so I started looking around Seattle for an engineer, and some are like, you're crazy. Like the record should have been done in the spring. And you're not, you don't even, and at that point, I only had a couple of songs where I had like little bits, but I was looking for an engineer, and I said, it's okay. I'll finish a song. You start mixing. I'll keep composing. It'll be fine. So I had about 4 songs mostly done in the end of September of 2017. I found an engineer willing to accept the challenge to do as much as we could. And I did that. I started composing, and I finished and this was the first 12 songs. I finished composing in mid-November, and then we hurried and put together that first 12 songs and did kind of a partial release. Then I started to draft the novel after Christmas. And then the following August, I started composing again. I wrote for another about 2.5 months, finished those 12 songs. And then in 2018, like I finished this, I sent it to disc makers. I didn't even have CDs, and we did our first show. So, I mean, if you think of just the composing time, it was probably 5 or 6 months, but it didn't all happen continuously. And maybe there's something about forcing yourself for a deadline. I don't know.
Some of us do work better under pressure, right? Man,
So yes, so now I just started to.
At this point, with what you've described thus far, so are you? Obviously you're the singer. I know this, but were you playing the music as well? Were you playing the instruments?
No, another blessing curse thing is I'm one of those guys. I can hear the music with great clarity in my mind, all of the instruments. The drums, I always need a little bit of help. I like a good creative drummer to help me fix that stuff. But I the only thing I can play a little bit is the keys. So I will do all the composition in Pro Tools, and then once I have that done, then I actually bring in musicians to do the real audio. And then on the vocal parts, because there's like different characters, I sing a few of the songs, but the majority of the male songs, and of course all the female songs, I have other vocalists. And as a young kid, I probably would have been like, oh, I'm just going to sing everything. But one of the biggest thrills is hearing another great vocalist sing a song you wrote. And so I do sing some of the songs, but and I compose everything. But when it comes time to actually record the record, I bring in the people that I've been able to find to help do the real audio recording.
Got it. Okay. So those first 12 done, you brought in whomever, and now where we are today with this release, how many people total are on this record? It's a lot, right?
It is a lot. There are 4 guitar players, 1 bass player, 1 drummer. I mean, just in the recording, there's at least 6 vocalists, maybe 7. I get confused because there's the people that are on the recorded audio. Then there is, during COVID, when we couldn't do any shows, we did all the bands, we did an at-home recording of the album. I had a narrator do all the narration, and we put it all together in a long form sort of video on YouTube. It's like a 2-hour presentation where it's not like from a stage, like we're playing from home, but we had some video guys that I know sort of artfully edit in the video. You get all the narration which connects the story pieces between the songs. So it's kind of like watching a Christmas special. We had an illustrator in Ukraine do motion graphics. And some of the people on that are different than on the album, just a little bit. And then when we have toured, when we've done shows, there's a slightly different complexion of of musicians. So like when I put them all together, it's a huge number of people who've contributed.
Amazing. So it's kind of, being that you have brought it out live, then it's kind of a holiday rock and roll theatrical experience, kind of, huh?
It absolutely is. It's the way I think about it too is I feel like, and I didn't invent this phrase, but the idea of standing on the shoulders of giants, and it happens in all of the arts or in even the sciences. You people come before you that create the path. And so I mentioned some of the guys that created the path for me. And my hope is that what Symphony North does is, I take everything that they did, I run it through the filter that is me to create something new. I think, one of the things that's unique about Symphony North is I do more brass and woodwinds in the instrumentation, more strings than other original Christmas rock groups, and the story element. Like, I always ground everything very firmly in classic story architecture. So it is a theatrical. In fact, it's a really good observation, because when we do the show, sort of curtain to curtain, we don't break the fourth wall. There's an intermission, but there's never a moment where the singer or the guitar player addresses the audience. We really kind of want to submerge you in the story, and then at the conclusion of the last song, then we address the audience. Once in a while, we've done like a short encore of like a Christmas tune or something, but it's not Broadway because it's not set pieces like that. But right. it's Handel like invented the form of the oratorio, which is it wasn't the big operas with all of the set pieces, but it was very story driven, and the music and the singer would paint the picture for you. And that's really what this is, although we have a full band there that you can see versus in a pit, where it's a full on story, sort of start to finish. And the reason
doing a lot of multimedia, like
we haven't done that yet. When we've staged the show so far, we've just tried to do a good light package. But I have a vision for exactly what I want the visuals to evolve to when I have the money to produce them correctly. To even enhance the story further from what it is today, but it is sort of rock theater, if you will, in a unique way, because again, we're not. And sometimes that's a missed. I kind of miss that. You like to banter with the audience and engage them, but it's this idea of this submersion in the story. And the reason I wanted to do this is I wanted to have songs like Solfeggietto, which we talked about right before, which is a Bach piece. And then there's a Christmas carol embedded in an instrumental in the center of that. But it's a complete barn burner. Like, it's a hard song to play. Only like really gifted musicians can do that song justice. And so that rips. But I want people, when they're leaving.
You're going to hear in a little bit, folks. You will hear that song he's talking about.
Yeah, we had that one go kind of viral for us on Facebook, because like the musicians would see it, they'd be like, oh, "Holy cow!"
Right.
But so I want people going out being thrilled for sure, because it is a rock show in part. But I want them going out, I guess, moved, like touched by the story, that changing of the heart kind of idea, that I think, my idea about Christmas is that regardless of how you celebrate it, I hope that one of the things that unifies us around Christmas is the idea of like goodwill for men, like,
right.
and women, but just the idea that, the person who stands in need, the finer part of humanity is when we try and help. And I think, I hope we all agree on that. And I want people walking out feeling just a little bit more encouraged about that idea, because the story has shown them that like everybody's got something unique to offer. Like, my favorite idea in the Bell Ringer is the idea that I don't know Ralph's whole backstory and you don't know Peter's whole backstory. And we both probably had trauma and trying times.
Everyone does, sure.
Everyone does. And I think it's precisely that stuff that makes Ralph the only guy that can help certain people. And Peter, the only guy who can help certain people, or at least fall into your path in your life. And I know that sounds a bit sappy when you say it out loud, but that's that's kind of the, you want you to be rocking, but I also want you to think, oh man, this Christmas stuff's cool because, people care. And
Right.
that's those two goals are what I hope the story delivers.
Interesting. Well, it sounds to me like from everything you've described, and because it is such a deep story, I can't wait now to listen to the record as a full entity. Obviously, this is not a singles type record. This is a good old fashioned, you best listen from start to finish record, um, which I look forward to doing. But it seems like it's almost tailor made for um, having a residency, maybe in Vegas or something, but somewhere for November and December that this can be performed on a daily basis or something like that. Maybe, I mean, I guess it could be a touring thing too, like, TSO that you have gone to see. But also, I could see it being like a stage piece and just staying in one place for the season. Um,
That's an interesting observation too, because we've had some people looking at us pretty seriously, and one of the guys, he said, he says you can do the tour for sure. He goes, but if you're interested in really trying to get the story and the music out there, he said the same thing. He goes, you could probably find some markets around the country where you find great local musicians, you find a theater, and it's like a run. It's a Christmas run for those people to put the production on. And in that way, more people could see it. And I think that's a really interesting idea. I think if we have enough success getting it out there, that a local theater and some local musicians would want to do that, that could be really cool. And I'd love to go do a Vegas residency in the future sometime. But you make a good point. Like if you think about your local theaters, a lot of them will run Christmas Carol, like in Nutcracker. They have standards that they do. So
exactly.
it's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems from everything you've described and from what I've heard and what I've learned about you, it just seems like that might be a good fit to me. But I could be wrong. I'm no expert, but
I like that idea.
that's what I'm thinking. Um, so so this record, it's out there. People can get it symphonynorth.com. I like that you kept it nice and simple. Just
Yeah. Yeah, they're on
okay.
the CDs, we actually held back two bonus tracks. So if you buy the CDs or you can stream it from our website, you get those two additional songs that aren't on Spotify and Apple and every place else. But if you're a subscriber or you listen to Pandora or even just YouTube, it's all available, now for free, basically, if you want to go check it out.
And
But
YouTube, I did want to make sure we mentioned, because I had asked you about it before we started recording, that I did see a video on your YouTube channel that's all about this record. Was that what you were speaking of earlier with the narration and everything that was put together? Was that the piece I stumbled upon on YouTube?
yeah, it is. There's on our YouTube channel, there's some other stuff too, because I've got some guests, like some of the members of the group are former Trans-Siberian Orchestra members. I've also got two current members of Dream Theater, who's my favorite music group, who guested on the record. So there's, excuse me, there's some videos that are kind of singles for sure, but we put together three videos that are long form. One is just the music. It's the set of just the music. If you're not a story person and you just want to listen to the music. One is all of the music with the narration, but it's still us playing the music. And then the third one is all the narration, and then the videos of the music are not the musicians, but they're actually motion graphics. Or motion comics, I think they call them. So there was like 12 or 15 illustrations that this illustrator kind of put in motion that depict parts of the story. So depending, you can kind of pick your poison. But each of them are like, you can kind of sit down and just sit back and go on the ride. And I would say like a lot of the songs are definitely, I tried to write them to be self-contained so that you could listen to one and it would be enjoyable as a single. But like the albums of old, which I can tell you appreciate, if you listen to it linearly, I guess, there's added benefit for the listener in the story and the impact. At least that was the goal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, from the way you described it, I think that's exactly how I'll take it when I get a chance to do that. Um, so, so we've got this. So now, being that you are multi-talented with being an author and the music and everything. And this is obviously, while it's Christmas every day for Peter, for many folks, they're not going to listen to this kind of music except maybe, like we were saying before, day after Thanksgiving through Christmas or something.
Yeah.
Do you have another band or other music that you're currently involved with as well that's non-Christmas related, or is this your musical life right now?
Right now, this is my musical life. And part of that is just time. Like one of the things I've learned the older I've gotten is that my most precious commodity is my time. Because I'm also a novelist and I've got some book contracts, and so I have to be thoughtful about spending some time each day doing that. So when I get music time, all of my music time this next year is going to be on the second Symphony North record. And I'm crafting the second storyline and novel for that. I have, been in other bands, and I to kind of keep myself, the pipes warm and just for a palate cleanser, I do covers on YouTube. Sometimes I'll do, I did an Aussie tune not too long ago. I've definitely done Dream Theater songs. And those are a lot of fun, but I don't have another original band. I think in Symphony North's future, there are some non-Christmas records that I'll write. But right now, like I've already got the next 4 Symphony North records, the sort of main storyline charted out. So I'm hoping to have enough success with the Bell Ringer and with these next couple of books I'm going to write that I can just do this full time. And our fans that, this is so helpful, Ralph, that you would have me on the show and to make people aware, because we don't have very much awareness yet. But the fans that we do have, they're just the best fans. Yeah, we were going to try and do a couple of shows on the East Coast this year, and one of the spouses of one of the members in the group is battling cancer. And
sorry to hear that.
It became kind of like unwieldy to think about, and we're not at a place with the group where we have redundancies. Some bands will go on the road and they got people all practiced up back home, ready to come out if someone's sick. We don't have that. So we just said it was a hard choice, but we decided we can't do it this year. And I felt so bad. I felt like I was disappointing our fans, but our fans started sending me messages just asking if we were okay. They weren't like angry or, you didn't come. They were worried about us. And I mean, it says something about the people that we're reaching, very fortunate that, and so, I'm hoping, and they're also waiting for the second record. So I feel this urgency to, deliver, because they love the Bell Ringer and they want to hear what's next.
Yeah, and you don't have 15 years to put the next one together.
No, I'm going to work really hard this year. I really want to have the second record out for next holiday, and I won't rush it. Like if it's not ready, I'll let it bake a little bit more. But I have a clear vision for the story. I've already started composing, and at the very least, even if it's not 100% ready, I'll have new music that we'll put out next year, just even if it's a handful of singles.
Got it. And then I just got to ask you before we end and play some of your music. So, your author, you said you've had several books. So what is that in a specific genre? Do you write a certain type of fiction, or what's your background with that? And how many books have you published?
Oh, I think at this point it's 10 or 12. All kind of in the broader science fiction and fantasy umbrella, although there's some Christmas stuff in there. So depending on how you view Christmas, it's either fantasy or realism or whatever, or just straight fiction. An interesting note there is a couple of the books that I have published are novelizations of concept records by Dream Theater, the band. I'm a big Dream Theater fan. I've collaborated with the band and John Petrucci in particular, who's their founder and guitar player.
Right.
On one called The Astonishing, and another really big record for them called Scenes from a Memory. And in fact, that one just came out a couple of months ago. So I feel like one of the places I spent most of my time in the past, 20 years is really focusing on this intersection of music and narrative. And
Mhm.
so, I that's the place that intersection just inspires me, and that's why I do these Christmas stories and Christmas albums. But
Right.
um, and then the last thing I'll mention is I've got a new fiction series that's just going to kick off here probably this year, within the next 18 months, with a number one New York Times bestseller by the name of Brandon Sanderson. He might be the biggest name in fantasy fiction right now. And he and I, the main character in it is a heavy metal singer. And so that's why he picked me to collaborate, because he says, I know you know this stuff.
Right. That would be about the only thing I could write about.
You'd be great at that. And we were talking just before we got on here, and you were telling me I think you said some of the people you've sat down with, like Alice Cooper.
Many, many moons ago. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've got stories, but yeah, that that intersection just, is where I live and breathe. And so the other collaboration, the first song is called Songs of the Dead. There's gonna be the first novel, and it's it's heavy. It's the intersection of heavy metal and sort of urban fantasy. So I just, if I can continue to play in the playground of music and storytelling, that's where I'm happiest.
Or a happy camper. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. Yeah. When I got your music, I'm so glad that, we got to meet today, because when I got your music, I had no idea you were an author either. I learned that along the way, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I tend to read, because I'm just such a music geek. I tend to end up reading autobiographies by people, so I don't get too much fiction or anything else that's not about somebody's life, it seems like. But if I ever have time, I would. So I think that's really cool, and it's pretty neat that you were able to make a mark there too, because that's not really, to me, I don't think anyway. I don't know a lot about the publishing business where books are concerned, but I got to think that that's not a whole lot easier than being a musician and trying to get a record out. So
No, I think music is still harder. Although it's an interesting time we live in now. You were around in the heyday of radio, but today I heard a statistic the other day, something like, I don't know, over 100,000 songs are uploaded to Spotify every day.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
And so, it's so hard. And some of it I'm sure is amazing and so hard for us to find, like needle in a haystack. But there's also, they've made it so easy to publish your music or publish your book, that there's not always the same rigor around the creation of the art. And so, that's a real thing. I'm still old school in terms of the creation of the music. I just don't think you can rush that. I don't think you can, certainly AI and all of that stuff. I have a lot of ethical problems with that stuff.
I do too.
And it's just a shortcut that, and unfortunately there's a lot of bad actors just, creating music, creating books, and just putting them into the ecosystem, and just to try and grab some naive dollars from people who don't know better. And so it makes it tough for old school guys like us who really care about the art, to find the people who still care about the art. And there's a lot of them. I think you can hear and see and read the difference. But
I think so too. I think people are still discerning enough to know,
Yeah.
what's what. I do think so.
It takes a show like this, though. I'm so happy we met, because it takes a show like yours that is still trying to bring that stuff to people's awareness. For people to find
it's hard. It's hard though. Like, I think about it a lot. Back in the 80s and the radio and stuff, there might be 250,000 people listening an hour, or a quarter hour or whatever, but lots of people, because it was, especially for folks that were at work, the radio was pretty much your only option. So it was a passive experience. You turn on the radio and hear some new music or whatever, and it worked back then, because there wasn't all these things like you just described, all these places that you can put stuff out into the ecosphere. And so, doing this podcast, I love doing it. And the audience I do have, I love them because they are still excited like I am about new music and wanting to learn what's out there and don't have the time or patience to dig through the other 100,000 to find the one good one. So that's where I try to fill that void. But I also know there's nowhere near the amount of people that listen to this podcast that used to hear me on the radio, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's still good, and I'm still really happy to try to help musicians promote what they've got out there as best as I can. But it is different today, though. I think that's why, in the 80s, you could have a gold record and it was still maybe considered a little bit of a failure, like it should have been platinum or whatever. And now you're probably a big success if you sell 25,000 copies. Just the numbers have shifted, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the only thing I feel bad about is I see and hear so much great stuff being created, and a lot of crappy stuff too. But I come across a lot of really, really good stuff. And I think to myself, man, if this was 40 years ago, millions of people would definitely know about this and go support it. Now it's maybe going to be 10,000 people or something if you're, And so that's the only thing that makes me sad that, all these things that are out there, like you say, for whether it be publishing a book or music, on the one hand, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's great that, hey, I just made this piece of music and I can put it in a gazillion places. But the fact that it's in a gazillion places is also the bad part about it. The old record business model, for the faults that it did have, at least there was a nice path. You had tour support, even though you may owe a bunch of money when you're done, but at least you can get out on the road to support your product. You could get matched up with a successful band and be their opener to get more ears on what you're doing, and all these. There was architecture. Now it's a free for all still, and people don't know where to turn. I mean, that's what started me doing this podcast, because I would get notes through Facebook, people asking me, hey, are you the Ralph Rasmussen that used to be on WVVX? I used to listen to you, da, 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 da. I missed that. I don't know how to find cool new music anymore. And, this was my favorite band, whatever. Do you know any bands that are like Testament or like, Bon Jovi or whoever it is that the person's interested in? And then I think to myself, yes, I do know of new music that is in that, area. And that's why I decided to do this, because I would hear that over and over again, that people don't really know how to quickly go find a brand new act that they're unfamiliar with. And they're even sometimes back in the beginning when I started getting these notes, they weren't even 100% sure how to find out if their favorite old band made a new record. Now that's a little more clear, I think, to people that, every band's doing a good job having a Facebook page and a website and all that. But when I first started getting these notes, not as much. And so, that's what prompted me to do this. But it's not the same. I mean, I'm happy to help in any way I can, but I feel bad that it can't be bigger. That's all.
Well, that's the time we live in. Today, the analog, what comes to mind, the analog to a guy like you, who was bringing people new music, and it was kind of like the channel, radio was the channel to get it, is to hit big, you either got to have a record company who's going to pour a huge amount of money into breaking you. And by the way, most of the record companies aren't going to care about you unless you already have this big platform. Like that's the catch-22 with the record labels, is they're data mining on TikTok to find somebody who's already got millions of followers. Then they're signing them and then throwing more gas on the fire to make them bigger. They're not looking for an artist with like real ability to songwrite to grow them. So the only way a guy like me can do that, to like catch big, is either get lucky or to hit the algorithm. And hitting the algorithm's like hitting the lotto. You don't know how to do it. You just play. And so yeah, it's harder than ever. And so you do your best to create the best art you can, and just kind of hope. But if you don't like enjoy the art for the process of the art, it's the worst
And
way to try
forget
and
it.
make a buck.
Right, exactly. No, but thankfully there are people like you and I that just love music. And thank you, Radio Bypass folks, for
Yes, for sure.
supporting this show, and in turn, all these great musicians we get a chance to talk with and share their music. All right, well, we kind of got off on a tangent there, so
Good tangent, though.
a good tangent. But let's wrap things up here and play some of your music. So, as I told you, the song that I cannot pronounce, that I should be able to pronounce since I'm mostly Italian, I'm going to have you introduce that. So we're going to play that first. And then the other song that I have not gotten to yet, which was, I got to go look because my memory has not been real good these last few days because I've got too many things on my mind. The other piece we did not feature yet was Yes, Fairy Tales. So, guys, first of all, before we even do that, we've been joined today by a fascinating musician, publisher, Peter Orullian from Symphony North. And like we were just saying, it's tough these days, so please go like and follow them on Facebook and any other, or you're on all the social media probably.
Yeah.
So go follow these guys. Check out their website, symphonynorth.com. Go to their YouTube channel, check them out, give them a subscribe, a thumbs up, whatever you can do. Because all these little, as I say about my own show and the poor job I've done of promoting my YouTube channel, please do that because it really helps all of us a little bit and only takes you a second to hit click. So if you can do that, but look for more music for these guys. Even though Christmas is over, I may still sneak a song or two in the coming weeks from this record because I just think it's fascinating. I love that it's so from the heart. That kind of stuff always means a lot to me. Where I know a musician has really put his heart and soul into what they've created, which most do, but sometimes not. So I really appreciate that. And Peter, it's been great having you come by Radio Bypass, man. Really, really fascinating to talk with you.
Yeah. This has been a pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate you, and I also appreciate everything you're doing, even if the listenership is not the 250,000 that it was in the heyday. The people who are listening care, and I'll be happy to let everybody I know about your channel.
Well, thank you, sir. And I will do the same as well. All right. So now let's hear some music from Symphony North. If you listened to our Christmas episode this past Saturday, you heard 2 songs. Now you're going to hear 2 more, and we're putting this interview out right away. So this one's not going to look all pretty like a lot of them. It's just going to be us shooting the ball here and getting educated on Symphony North and checking out some of their music just in time. If you're doing last minute Christmas shopping tonight, play this in your car, listen along. Even if you can't watch the video part, just listen to the audio, take in some music as you're running around. And our thanks again to Peter Orullian. And Peter, if you could introduce the song I can't pronounce, and we're going to kick into it.
Yeah, it's called Solfeggietto / Patapan. So Solfeggietto is a Bach piece, which you could play any time of the year because it's not particularly Christmas. But in the center, there's a breakdown with Patapan, which is an old Irish Christmas carol. So that's the one. It's pretty ripping. This one's challenging for the group and would be for anybody. But you'll recognize it when it starts to play.
And this is the one you said a lot of guitar players have been blown away by.
Yeah, in fact, I sent this video to John Petrucci of Dream Theater, and he was like, "Wow." So that's pretty high praise if you know John. He's a consummate guitar player.
Excellent. All right, everybody. Here comes some Symphony North. Thanks for checking this out. Please like and follow Symphony North on social media. Thank you, Peter. Let's rock some Christmas music.
stars high in a winter sky. Dreams they're given life to fly. Small hands reaching up to try to take hold of the wonder in their sight. Children, they hear the bells and then they lift 1,000 earnest prayers. Their hearts are just not bound by world-war cares. They can just believe. A man dressed in white and red, a snowman with a hat upon its head, a drum played instead of gifts, they said, a shepherd who seeks the one instead. But life, it can dim the bells and even silence 1,000 earnest prayers, and by dark